Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sadhu, 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 sadhu. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami, Satyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, Satyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, Satyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Panatipata veramani sikkapadang samadhiyami. Adinna dana veramani sikkapadang samadhiyami. Kametu miccācara veramani sikkapadang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikkapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya manjapama dacchana veramani sikkapadang samadhiyami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Today is the ninth discussion of this series. And before I start the session, as I always do, I make one point. All the Dhamma that I am explaining to you in this discussion, I have taken from the oldest Tripitaka in the world, which is kept at the British Library in London. And the British Library is less than 20 miles from our Vihara. So I was fortunate enough to have access to that library and the Tripitaka on a regular basis and read the sutras that I was interested in. So all the Dhamma that I'll be teaching you is from that old Tripitaka. That Tripitaka is over 2000 years old and it has been written down at Alulena Raja Mahavihara in Sri Lanka 456 years after Lord Buddha passed away. Now some of the Dhamma points that I'll be explaining to you from that Tripitaka might differ from what you have already learned because that Tripitaka is 2000 years old and that was written by Arahat monks. And since then, all the books that are written in English or any other language, most languages, especially all the Tripitakas, have been written down during the past 250 years. And I, I strongly believe that none of them have been written down by Arahat. And also the source document they have used to write down those Tripitakas, including the one that they have in Sri Lanka, in Pali and Sinhala, the source document was the Visuddhimagga, which is the set of 17 books written by a Brahmin priest, whose name was Gosha, who came to Sri Lanka and ordained himself by the name of Buddha Gosha, remained as a Buddhist monk for 4 years, and then left the robes and went back to South India. But after doing a massive destruction, the largest destruction to Buddhism. I will tell you that story next week. Now today, I'm going to, now so far, we have discussed the Four Noble Truths, the first Noble Truth of suffering, reason for suffering, out of suffering, and we were discussing the way out of suffering. In way out of suffering, we discussed briefly how to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, and we went up to the eighth one, Samma Samadhi, which is also uh, known as Dhammanu Dhamma Patipada. Now, Lord Buddha said there are four things that one has to do in order to uh, comprehend Dhamma, attain Sammadhi, and become Sothapanna. That's Kalyana Mitra Sevana, Sirisad Dharma Sravana, Yoniso Manasikara, Dhammanudhamma Patipada. So we covered the first three briefly. We will discuss them in more detail in the second round when I explain to you how to actually do this in practice. Here in the first round, we are only discussing the theory. So the fourth one, Dhammanudhamma Patipada, we are going to discuss today. Now, up to now, before I started the discussion, I recapped what we have discussed so far. But today I am not going to do that because I need more time today. Because I am going to explain to you two sutras today, which are necessary to understand how to practice this Dhammanudhamma Patipada. Dhammanudhamma Patipada is Sabba Papastakaranam Kusalasa Upasampada. And that also you will see once you have understood this to a certain extent, you will see Dhammanudhamma Patipada is also the Noble Eightfold Path. So Dhammanudhamma Patipada, Lord Buddha explained in another way as Sabba Papasta Akaranam Kusalasa Upasampada Sachitta Pariyodapanam Etang Buddha Anusapana. Sabba Papasta Akaranam means eradicate all unwholesome thoughts which create unwholesome deeds and also create unwholesome qualities. Kusala Supasampada means eradicate, practice, cultivate, and develop wholesome thoughts which will create wholesome deeds and also strengthen wholesome qualities. Sachitta Pariyodapanam means through the above process, purify your mind, meaning strengthen your wisdom, develop your wisdom to the highest level, and you will understand Dhamma, how this universe works, especially how the Four Noble Truths work. Etang Buddha Anusasanam means this is the advice given by every Samma. Now, that is clear. I have repeated this several times to you now. How do we do this? Now, Lord Buddha has explained how to do this in a sutra called Veda Vitakka Sutra. Now, I'm going to read the sutra to you from the English Tripitaka, translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi. I think most of you who live in the state, the Buddhists who live in the state, have heard of Bhikkhu Bodhi because he is the president of the American Buddhist organization, Buddhist Society, and he's an eminent Buddhist monk in the world. He got his PhD in anthropology in his 20s. Then he went to Sri Lanka, studied Buddhism, ordained himself as a Buddhist monk in Sri Lanka, lived in Sri Lanka for 24 years, mastered several languages, and translated the Tripitaka into English. So I'm going to use one of Bhikkhu Bodhi's Tripitakas. And first I will read the Veda Vitakka Sutra to you paragraph by paragraph and explain it to you. In this sutra, Lord Buddha explains how he discovered his Buddhist Anapana meditation technique, which has nothing to do with breathing meditation. Breathing meditation was always there, and that's completely different from Buddha Anapana meditation technique. I myself didn't know that until I was 57. I am 62 now. I became a monk at 56. After becoming a monk, after 13 months only, I discovered correct Dhamma, correct Buddha Dhamma, and correct Buddha meditation. In this Veda Vitakka Sutra, The translation of Veda Vitaka means two kinds of thought. In this sutra, Lord Buddha explains, Bhikkhu Bodhi has explained very nicely here. He has summarized the sutra. In my opinion, he has done a very good job in these two sutras, the Vitaka Sutra and Vitaka Samsana Sutra. In some of the sutras, I am not entirely happy with its translation. In sutras like Mahasatara Satipatthana Sutra and Anapanasati Samadhi Sutra. But here, he has done a very good job. I agree with him 100%. Uh, I'm going to read the sutra to you. In this sutra, Lord Buddha explains, just before he attained Buddhahood, how he discovered Anapana meditation technique, how he practiced, excuse me, sorry, how he practiced that meditation technique. Through the practice of it, how he managed to eradicate raga, dvesha, moha gradually and develop maitri, karuna, mudita, upekha gradually, and eventually got rid of raga, dvesha, moha completely and developed Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha to the highest level, then he saw the light. He got the wisdom, his wisdom developed to the highest level, and he understood how everything in the universe works. So let me read the sutra to you. This is Majjhima Nikaya. In English, it says middle length courses. Sutra number 19, Dveda Vitaka Sutra. Two kinds of thought. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's grove, Anathapindika's park. There he addressed the bhikkhus thus, Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, they replied, the Blessed One said this, Bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. And I set on the other side thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. So here, Lord Buddha is explaining that before he became enlightened, while he was still a bodhisattva, he thought that he should divide his thoughts into two classes, two categories. So thoughts involving raga, dvesha, moha, he put on to one side. Thoughts involving maitri, karuna, mudita, upekha, he put on to other side. So raga, dvesha, moha in English, they use the words attachment, anger, and ignorance. And Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha, they use the words such as loving kindness, equanimity, and sympathetic joy. So, as I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of most. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and delays away from Nibbana. Sorry, leads away from Nibbana. When I consider this leads to my own affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered this leads to others' affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered this leads to the affliction of both, it subsided in me. When I considered this obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. So here Lord Buddha is explaining, uh, While he was watching his mind deal with the words that Bhikkhu Bodhi has used here in English is diligent, ardent, and resolute. So he carefully watched his mind and he realized that a thought of sensual desire, a thought involving raga, dvesha, moha, came to his mind. So instead of allowing this thought to cultivate, now like we discussed last week, using his samma concentration and some samma effort and samma concentration, instead of allowing this thought to develop in his mind and cultivate, he analyzed the thought, he looked at the thought, and he realized that this thought is going to cause difficulties for himself and others, and it's going to obstruct his nibbana and others' nibbana. So he decided, once he realized that, he could see that the thought subsided in him. And then he tried using his samma effort and samma concentration. He managed to eradicate that thought from his mind completely. Now going on to the next paragraph, he says, as I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of ill will arose in me. A thought of cruelty arose in me. I understood thus this thought of cruelty has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from Nibbana. When I considered thus, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of cruelty arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, and did away with it. So he says again, while he was watching his mind closely, using his samma concentration and samma effort, he realized that another thought involving raga, dvesha, moha arose in his mind, came to his mind. So instead of allowing that thought to cultivate or process with Vijnana program, he looked at this thought, analyzed it, and he realized that this thought is going to cause difficulties for him and difficulties for others, and affliction to him, affliction to others, and it's not going to help his nibbana, not going to help others' nibbana. As a matter of fact, it's going to be an obstruction to his nibbana and others' nibbana. So while he was realizing this, the thought started to subside, and then he managed to abandon it, remove it, and got away with it. I mean, eradicate it completely. Then, going on to the third paragraph, it says, Bhikkhus, whatever Bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of sensual desire, he has abandoned the thought of renunciation to cultivate the thoughts of sensual desire. And then his mind inclines to thoughts of sensual desire. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of ill will, upon thoughts of cruelty, he has abandoned excuse me, the thought of cruelty to cultivate the thought of uh, he has abandoned the thought of non-cruelty to cultivate the thought of cruelty. And then his mind inclines to thought of cruelty. So it's making another point here. What it's saying is, if a bhikkhu, or basically it could happen to any person, let's say any person, if that person is thinking of raga, desha, moha thoughts in his mind all this most of the time, then his mind gets used to it. Automatically, every time when Rupa Vedana Sanya comes to his mind will happily start thinking. cultivating that thought, processing that thought with the Vijnana program with Raga Dvesha Moha and producing thoughts involving Raga Dvesha Moha, which he might put into action. Then it becomes Raga Dvesha Moha, unwholesome deeds. And in the meantime, they will strengthen unwholesome qualities. So he'll be, without realizing, he'll be accumulating sin and accumulating unwholesome qualities. Now, here you have the danger that you have to understand is the Pruthajana person. Pruthajana person means the person who hasn't comprehended Dhamma, who hasn't comprehended Dhamma, attains Sammadhisthi and becomes Sotapanna. These three things happen at the same time. Once the person comprehends the Four Noble Truths, he attains Sammadhisthi. The person who has attained Sammadhisthi, the title he gets is Sothapanna. Sota means Nibbana Marga, Apanna means arrive. It's like a person who is doing a bachelor's degree. Once he has passed the exam, final exam, he gets a certificate, and the title that he gets is BSc or BA or whatever. So that's the relationship between comprehending Dhamma, attaining Sotapanna, attaining Sammadhisthi, and becoming Sotapanna. Those three things happen at the same time. So this is very much linked to what we discussed last week, how to practice our Samma effort and Samma concentration in trying to control our mind in the sense that keep Raga, Dvesha, Moha thoughts out of our mind and practice allow Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekka thoughts to come into our mind and cultivate them and practice them and develop them. Through that, we release positive energy into the environment and also and earn merits that way by cleaning the environment and also strengthen our Maitri, Mudita, Upekka qualities. Now, the important point you have to realize here is that the Pruthajana person, a person who hasn't become Sotapanna, he'll be thinking of Raga, Dvesha, Moha thoughts all the time. If a person does that for 1 hour, every second he'll be releasing negative energy into the environment several times. Within 1 hour, he could be releasing negative energy into the environment more than 3,600 times. It could be double that, and all those are things. Every bit of negative energy that he releases into the environment pollutes the environment, and that has a negative effect on every sentient being, every living being living on these 31 planes, and every plant and tree living on this earth. So just think about it, the gravity of doing this, practicing unwholesome thoughts. This is why Lord Buddha said, unless the person has comprehended Dhamma, attained Sammadhisthi, and come to Sotapanna, that person has no other place to go other than the four hells. His next port of call is guaranteed to be the four hells after death. So just think about it. You will realize, and if you really understand the gravity of that statement, your hair on your head should stand straight. In some of the sutras, Lord Buddha has said that. In another sutra, he says, a person, a Pruthajana person who is not so Sotapanna, he is giving an example. He says, when a wife is sick and husband has to do the cooking, husband will, let's say husband goes to the kitchen and starts cooking, and because he has to go to work also, he's rushing through, and those days men had long hair, and suddenly the fire, his hair catches fire. So Lord Buddha is asking his disciples, should he leave cooking and everything else for a moment and go and put off the fire from his hair, otherwise it will go to his head and he will die? Or should he say to the hair, wait for a moment, I have to finish the cooking first because my wife is not well and my children have to go to school and I have to go to work. So ask the fire to wait. So there's no way you can ask the fire to wait. So similarly, Lord Buddha said, for a human being, give second priority to everything else because unless you become Sotapanna, there's, it's guaranteed, almost guaranteed, that your next port of call would be the forehead. Don't take it personally. You have to understand the gravity of it in order to comprehend Dhamma and take a U-turn from the route that you are following now, which will lead you to the forehead. Take a U-turn and come to Samadhi, come to the correct route. There are only two routes in this world, according to Buddha Dhamma. First one is Samadhi, the correct route that will take you, once you are Sotapanna, you will go to a good heaven and you will be there until you become Anagami. While if you become Anagami, you will go to a good Brahmaloka. And from there, sorry, I shouldn't use the word heaven, I should use the word Divya Loka. Once you become Sotapanna, before, let's say you become Sotapanna, before you die, you will go to a good Divya Loka and you will be there until you become, you attain the third level of enlightenment, Anagami. And once you are Anagami, you will go to a good Brahmaloka. And from there, you will attain Arahathood, and eventually you will go to Nibbana, which is the permanent place of happiness. One day we will discuss what Nibbana is like. Right now, I think I shouldn't try to explain Nibbana. It's like trying to explain a fish who lives in water, what dry land is like. Okay, so let's carry on with this sutra. So far, Lord Buddha has given two examples of uh, the rather the unwholesome thoughts coming to his mind and how he managed to eradicate them. Now he is saying, he is explaining another point. But with the excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body, and when the body is tired, the mind becomes disturbed, and when the mind is disturbed, it is far from concentration. So I steadied my mind internally, halted it, brought it to singleness, and concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind should not be disturbed. So what he is explaining here is that when he was doing that repeatedly, watching his mind and eradicating raga thoughts, after several hours, he felt tired, his body felt tired. Maybe this could be after 12 hours, 24 hours. We don't know how long. He sat there for many days until he attained Buddhahood. So maybe after 2, 3 days, he felt so tired. Then what he did was, he says, then his body became tired and his mind became tired, which means that he is finding it difficult to concentrate, difficult to control his wholesome effort and wholesome concentration. So what he has done is he says, I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness, and concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind should not be disturbed. So he has used tremendous effort, some effort to the maximum, and tried and quieted his mind, calmed it down, brought it to singleness, and managed to concentrate again. Now let's go to the next paragraph. It says, as I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of non-ill will arose in me. A thought of non-cruelty arose in me. I understood thus this thought of non-cruelty has arisen in me, This does not lead to my own affliction or to others' affliction, or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to Nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought, even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from. So what he's saying here is, again, he was concentrating on his mind, watching his mind using his samma effort and samma concentration. And he realized that a wholesome thought came to his mind, a thought involving Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekka. So, without uh, processing, without thinking of it straight away, he looked at this thought, examined it, checked it, using his Samma effort and Samma concentration. And he realized that this is the wholesome thought, this is the good thought, and it does not cause difficulties or affliction to him, his Nibbana or others' Nibbana. Uh, on the contrary, it helps his path to Nibbana and others' Nibbana. So he took that thought into his mind and practiced it, cultivated it as long as possible. Again, he says, while he was doing that, again he felt tired. But with excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body. And when the body is tired, the mind becomes disturbed. And when the mind is disturbed, it is far from concentration. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness, and concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind should not be disturbed. So it's the same thing as he did before. He's saying that while he was practicing these wholesome thoughts. Now remember what he is doing here is Samma Samadhi. He is sitting at one place and trying to practice wholesome thoughts all the time and not allowing unwholesome thoughts to come in. So he's saying even when he is practicing wholesome thoughts for a long time, maybe for several days, he says with excessive thinking and pondering, he felt tired, his body felt tired and his mind felt tired. So not allowing the tiredness to take over the situation, what he did was using the maximum Samma effort and Samma concentration, he managed to steady his mind, quieted it, brought it to singleness, and concentrated it, and managed to continue his meditation that way. So he's making another point here again, because whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of renunciation, he has abandoned the thoughts of sensual desire to cultivate the thoughts of renunciation. And then his mind inclines to thoughts of renunciation. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of non-ill will, upon thoughts of non-cruelty, he has abandoned the thoughts of cruelty to cultivate the thoughts of non-cruelty. Now he explained the other side earlier, thoughts, unwholesome thoughts. Now he explained the same point about wholesome thoughts. He's saying if a person is trying to think of wholesome thoughts all the time, then his mind will get used to it and mind will be inclined to think of wholesome thoughts all the time. And it will not, the mind will not like to think of unwholesome thoughts. That's what he's saying here. Then what he's saying is, he kept on doing this, and now he's saying, tireless energy was arose in me, and unremitting mindfulness was established. My body was tranquil and untroubled, my mind concentrated and unified. Quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I entered upon and abided in the first jhana. I directly knew birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, What has to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. So here what he's saying is after doing this for a long time, practicing this technique of practicing wholesome thoughts in his mind all the time and not allowing a single unwholesome thought to come in, he managed to eradicate raga quality, dvesha quality, moha quality completely out of his mind, which means eradicate vijnana. So this is why I say vijnana, this must mean consciousness. Think about it. You know, the Arahat person has completely eradicated vijnana, but he's not unconscious. He's totally 100% conscious. So consciousness and vijnana are two different things. In other words, consciousness is not the right word to describe vijnana. English language does not have right word. If you use the wrong words, you get wrong meanings and you go on a wild goose chase. That's the problem. So, excuse me. So he's saying that after doing this for a long time, after practicing this Dhammanu Dhamma Patipada, in other words, Sabba Papasa Karanam Kusalasu Sampada. So he must have practiced it for several days, and suddenly he realized tireless energy arose in me, and unremitting mindfulness was established. My body was tranquil and untroubled, my mind concentrated and unified. He suddenly realized that tireless energy arose in him. Earlier, he was feeling very tired because he wasn't having any food. Maybe he had water or little food, maybe not. And well, his body was tranquil, untroubled, and his mind concentrated and unified. And then he says, called secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I entered upon and abide in the first jhana. I directly knew birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to state of being. So here you can see all he has done is keeping unwholesome thoughts out of his mind and practicing wholesome thoughts in his mind all the time. And by doing that, he managed to eradicate raga, dvesha, moha quality from his mind completely and eradicate vijnana permanently. Once raga, dvesha, moha is eradicated, vijnana is finished because raga, dvesha, moha is the battery that gives the power, that is the energy that is necessary to produce jnana. It is the energy produced by these three poisons. Once these three poisons are removed completely forever, never to come back, then there's no more vijnana. That's why in Paticampada says, avidya nirodha, sankara nirodha, vijnana nirodha, nama nirodha. Sankara is Raga Dvesha Moha. Once you remove Raga Dvesha Moha, then Sang means Raga Dvesha Moha, Kara means the action. So once you stop acting, once you stop thinking with Raga Dvesha Moha, you can completely eradicate Vijnana. Once you have stopped completely, that means you have eradicated Raga Dvesha Moha qualities from your mind, which means Vijnana is permanently eradicated. And then what happens is, at the same time, he has developed his wisdom to the highest level by practicing Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekka in his mind. Then suddenly he realized that tireless energy arose in him and his mind became tranquil, unremitted mindfulness was established, body was tranquil, untroubled, mind concentrated and unified quite secluded from sensual pleasures, unwholesome state I entered upon and abided in the first jhana, I directly knew birth is destroyed. That means he realized that he eradicated Raga Desha Moha completely and there's no more vijnana. Vijnana Nirodha, Nama Rupa Nirodha. If there's no Vijnana in your astral body, that means your astral body cannot create Nama Rupa in the 31 planes. That means the next port of call that it has to go is Nibbana. If there's no Vijnana, the astral body has to go to Nibbana. That's the universal law. So holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There's no more coming to any state of being. So that is the Dveda Vitakka Sutra. I have explained to you uh, what is really necessary from the sutra for you to know. Okay, let's go to the other sutra. I want to finish this sutra as well today. I hope you wouldn't mind. Now, this sutra is called Vitakka Santana Sutra. It's right after the Dveda Vitakka Sutra in the Majjhima Nikaya. Dveda Vitakka Sutra is Sutra number 19, and Vitakka Santana Sutra is Sutra 20. And in Bhikkhu Bodhi's Tripitaka, it's page 211. Vitakka Santana Sutra. The English meaning is the removal of distracting thoughts. So Lord Buddha is explaining here. Here also, I think Bhikkhu Bodhi has done a fantastic job in translating it very nicely, correctly. As with the constraints of the English language, I think in my opinion, I think he has done a good job. So here he says, "Thus have I heard." This is Venerable Anand is saying. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savasti in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There he addressed the bhikkhus, thus bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, they replied, Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu is pursuing the higher mind, from time to time, he should give attention to five signs. Uh, what are the five? Here, bhikkhus, when a bhikkhu is giving attention to some sign, and owing to this sign, there arises in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion. Then he should give attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome. When he gives attention to some other sign concentrated with what is wholesome, when any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoned in him and subsided. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. So here, what Lord Buddha is saying is, when Rupa Vedana Sanya comes to his mind, sign means Sanya, and if he feels that this is a very strong sign, very strong Sanya, that is going to create a Raga, Dvesha, Moha thought in his mind. So instead of thinking of that Sanya, he will get another Rupa Vedana Sanya that he is familiar with, which is capable of creating a wholesome thought in his mind, and he will start thinking about it and cultivate that thought. Then automatically that unwholesome thought will go away from his mind. So that's technique number one, he is explaining. We will discuss this in more detail on the second round. Then the second one he is saying, if while he is giving attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, they are still arising in evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate and with delusion, then he should examine the danger in those thoughts. These thoughts are unwholesome, they are reprehensible, they result in suffering. When he examines the danger in those thoughts, then an evil, unwholesome thought connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoned in him and subside. Excuse me. With the abandoning of them in his mind becomes steady, internally quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. So the second point he's making, the second technique giving is, is that unwholesome thought is so strong. When he's trying has replaced the unwholesome thought with the wholesome thought and practicing it, and that the same unwholesome thought is trying to creep in again, or a strong unwholesome thought just trying to come into your mind. So then what he's saying is the second technique. He should examine the contents of that unwholesome thought, the contents of that Rupa Vedana Sanya, and the contents of the unwholesome thought that Rupa Vedana Sanya can create in his mind. And when he examines that, he will realize he should examine the danger of it, the damage that it could do to him, and the eventual ultimate result it can bring is the four hells. And then he will think about four hells, the suffering in the four hells, and then he will realize it's not worth it, then obviously it will go away from his mind. Always when an unwholesome thought comes to your mind, if you think that this unwholesome thought is going to take me straight into the four hells, and if you have studied enough about four hells, it will just go away from your mind, because that is, four hells is frightening enough to put away any unwholesome thought. Right. The third point he's making is, if while he's examining the danger in thought, uh, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion, then he should try to forget those thoughts and should not give attention to them. When he tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoning him and subsiding. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steady, internally quiet, brought to singleness, and concentrated. So here what he's saying is, even if while practicing the second technique, still that unwholesome thought is trying to creep into his mind with Rupa Vedana Sanya, then he should totally forget about it. He should he should be determined strongly. He should make his the strongest possible uh, effort and concentration, samma effort and samma concentration, and determine himself that I'm not going to think about this particular thing. Let's say if it's an enemy, he keeps coming back to you. You will tell your mind, I'm not going to think about this person because this is going to cause me trouble. No, at no cost, no matter what the cost is, I'm not going to think about it. You keep saying that to your mind, and eventually your mind will forget it. You will try and forget that person somehow. Try as hard as you can, and eventually you will be able to do it. Forget that thought, forget that person, forget that Rupa Vedana Sanya coming into your mind. Now, some of these techniques you may see, when you look at them first, they look very similar, but once you practice them for a while, you will realize that they are different from each other. They complement each other. So the fourth one, he says, if while he is trying to forget those thoughts and is not giving attention to them, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion. Then he should give attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts. When he gives attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoning him and subside. With the abandoning of them in his mind, becomes steady, internally quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. So the fourth point he's making is, even when you have, after you have eradicated that thought by using the third technique, and after some time again, that person, that your enemy, keeps coming back to your mind. So every time when that person comes to your mind in terms of Rupa Vedana Sanya, you still your thoughts process. You stop your thought process and let it still remain still. Stop thinking for a moment. And you stop thinking for a moment and you go back to a wholesome thought. And that way, you will be able to, that's another technique that you can use to stop or forget, get rid of, completely eradicate that particular thought coming to your mind in the form of Rupa Vedana Sanya. And the fifth one, he's saying, if while he is giving attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts, there still arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion. Then, now listen to this very carefully. Don't laugh. Then, with his teeth clenched and tongue pressed against the roof of his mouth, he should beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. So what he's saying is, even after the fourth technique, still this person, that particular Rupa Vedana Sanya, keeps coming back. Because maybe he has been the enemy of yours for trillions of lives, uncountable number of lives. You know, you have been fighting with each other. And it's so difficult to get rid of him from his mind. He's so deep down, you know, his what's the word? His memory is completely uh, solidly accumulated in your past memory, and it keeps coming back. Very difficult to get rid of it because you have been. That is what you have been doing for billions and billions of years, trillions and trillions of lives. Enemies come like that, you see. That's why Lord Buddha said, don't keep any animosity, even if a person slaps you, just wish him well and walk away, because it's not worth it. If you walk away, then that revengeful act is comes to an end. But if you do tit for tat, it will continue. And as long as those things continue, you will never be able to get out of samsara and end the suffering. So here, what he's saying is, if it is still keep coming, what you have to do is, this is practically, physically something, this is something physically that you have to do, not only mentally, with, with your teeth clenched and tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth. You should breathe down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. When your teeth clench, tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth, uh, beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind, then any evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion are abandoned in that person. With the abandoning of them, his mind becomes steadied, internally quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. So these are those are five techniques. There's a sixth one as well. So let me cover the sixth one also quickly. When a bhikkhu is giving attention to some sign, and owing to that sign there arises in him evil, unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, with hate, and with delusion, then uh, when then when he gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, any such evil, unwholesome thoughts are abandoning him and subsided. So here what he's saying is, if failing all those techniques, and that unwholesome thought keeps coming back to you, that enemy keeps coming back to you, what you do is, every time when he comes to your mind, you think of the Kalyana Mitra that you have, the person who has helped you, or your partner, or your mother, or someone who has helped you to follow this path to Nibbana, and keep thinking about it. And then but as long as you are cultivating that thought in your mind, and you are praising that person, transferring merits to them, and wishing him with nibbana, asking for forgiveness for any wrongdoings that you have done to that person, because you feel so grateful. Let's say if it's your parents, you can think of all the good things that they have done for you, with loving kindness, equanimity, and sympathetic joy, and all the help that they have given you to proceed down this path to Nibbana, you keep thinking about them, then that unwholesome thought will go away. That's the technique that is explained here. So those are the six techniques Lord Buddha has explained in this Vitakta Samsana Sutra. I think that's all we have to discuss as far as theory is concerned. And when we start discussing how to use this in practice, we have to use practical examples. We have to discuss as many practical examples as possible. And I will ask everyone to think of one practical example for every point. So once we go through so many practical examples, you will be able to get a very good idea of theory and the practical side how to do it. Then it's a question of sitting down and actually doing it.